So with the second episode of Kolchak, the Night Stalker, we finally get a narrative story, a plot, what have you, that is somewhat different from the previous efforts. We don't have a vampire, we don't have an immortal or anything like that. This time around, it's called The Zombie, and it actually utilizes the real folklore of zombies. They're not undead, flesh-eating cannibals, but rather they're pawns of the practitioners of voodoo. So the idea of the voodoo witch doctor could summon up a zombie to do their bidding. This is based on some amount of truth in that there was a certain type of drug that some of these voodoo practitioners were aware of, that it could simulate death. The target of this is then buried. The witch doctor waits for a bit and then exhumes this person, and due to the lack of oxygen has suffered a certain amount of brain damage, but this makes them a docile slave, and then they would be utilized for work and that sort of thing. Didn't always work out. Some people recovered, other people died in the grave before the guy could get them out. This kind of thing. It wasn't foolproof, and for the most part probably didn't work out that great at all. But nevertheless, the legend is born out from that. And so ultimately the fate is you become this hopeless slave to the witch doctor, that kind of thing. Was the original myth. For whatever reason, I guess just the aspect of rising from the grave, and that is why zombies became synonymous with this idea of flesh-eating creatures, which is more to do with movies since Night of the Living Dead and that sort of thing, which actually took its inspiration from The Last Man on Earth, which was those people were referred to as vampires. But the idea of that, of people being turned and dying and coming back as flesh-eating monsters, is where that comes from. It's not really based on any old folklore. But in the case of Kolchak, that's what we have here. But it's all centered around a revenge plot, where this Haitian woman, who is a practitioner of voodoo, her grandson was murdered by the mob, and she knows which of them were involved, and this also ultimately is revealed includes the chief of police, who's corrupt and whatnot, and it was all rather kind of stupid as the mobsters were talking about it, and the head boss was like, well, I didn't really mean carry it out. And so there's a lot of comedy routines throughout this. Once again, Kolchak is saddled with this woman, but she survives and leaves town, so she's not going to end up like the other girl. But of course, Kolchak this time around, not only does he run afoul of the police, but he runs afoul of the mobsters, and has to talk his way out of it and all this sort of thing. But of course, he's the only one, again, who stumbles upon what's really going on. There's a certain amount of evidence. There's dead chickens and this sort of thing as part of the ritual to achieve this. So basically, this woman has resurrected her dead grandson as a zombie, and so he's got superhuman strength now because he's a supernatural force. But his corpse is, of course, deteriorating as he performs these acts of revenge. And literally, they're finding these mobsters with basically snapped in half. He snaps their spines in half with his bare hands, all this type of stuff. And in that, the template plays out, of course. Kolchak is the one asking the right questions, and this irritates the police and all that. But of course, in this case, the police chief has a reason to keep a lid on this because he's suspecting this is leading back to his involvement with the mob. So, it plays into all of that. So you got a lot of different details here of utilizing crime stories married to this horror story of a zombie sent out to take revenge on these guilty parties. So Kolchak's getting a little too close. He finds the woman, he talks to her, and she tries to, bluff him and lead him the wrong way and all that sort of stuff, but it becomes clear to her this guy has figured it out, and so she adds his name to the list of targets for her zombie grandson. But now, so Kolchak says, well, I gotta look up zombie lore. So he does, and it turns out there's a book on it, tells you what to do. You gotta pour salt in the zombie's mouth, you gotta sew up the zombie's mouth. Better have at least 3 white candles that can hold him in place or something. But anyway, that's how you break the spell and all that. So this is what he's got to do. Well, the zombie attacks someone else, and Kolchak follows it to figure out where it goes to rest. Not in its grave. They've already dug up the grave, and there's no body in it and all that. So the zombie, to get back to this junkyard where he rests, well, he takes a bus. And I guess just out of politeness, no one wants to stare at this really ugly guy. Because he's rotting but he gets on the bus, and Kolchak tries to get on the bus too, but it takes off, so he has to grab onto the back and hang on and ride it. So it comes to the junkyard stop. The zombie gets off and goes in, and so Kolchak's got to go in there and find him, and he does. And so he's got to carefully crawl in on top of the zombie in hopes that he could perform the ritual. And he almost does it, but the zombie wakes up, starts to attack him. There's a dangling rope, so the zombie is put in it, is hanging from it. But of course, that wouldn't kill him alone. But he's able to set up the ritual with the white candles, and that's that. It subdues the zombie, and the grandmother is Haitian, but she's in the country illegally. She's found out and deported, and her grandson is reburied for a 3rd time. But Kolchak claims that, yes, they did put the salt in his mouth and sew his mouth shut as per the ritual to keep him. So behind the scenes, the authorities realized what was happening here, but don't want to talk about it. The police chief, his corruption is found out, but he's not tried or anything. He's just shown the door, and he retires from the position and all that. So it's all very quiet and shoved, swept under the rug and that sort of thing. So that's how it takes care of itself. But anyway, a good departure from a narrative and plot that they repeated 3 times here. Had they gone again with the 3rd movie, by its description involving aliens and androids, that would have been very different, of course. But they went with the Ripper, which was, attached to Jack the Ripper, but still it was very similar to the plot points and what have you of the first 2 films that they did. So here you go. Hey, we got to think of something else. So they did, and this is one of those rare occurrences since, Night of the Living Dead and so forth, where you get an actual zombie story. All right, far-fetched, and this was more mysticism and magic and everything making it work, but nevertheless, that's how the myth was born out, and it's more true to it than any of the zombie movies and Walking Dead and all that. But you kind of stuck with it. It's like silver bullets for werewolves, Getting a werewolf bite will turn you into a werewolf. Now, that's more Hollywood than actual werewolf folklore, but that's how these things happen. So anyway, interesting aspects to it. And once again, the charm overall wins out. And keeping everything dark, you don't really get that good of a look at the zombie. But, pretty close up look that he's in bad shape. having been dead and all, you know. You don't look your best when that happened. But, you know, works out quite well, and was a pretty good episode for The Night Stalker.